Hello again, my friends. Today, we're going to talk with an ex-Shopifyer. He's going to tell us about numbers, margins, profits. Thomas Gleeson is our guest today. He's currently the co-founder at StoreHero, and he's built what he calls a profit platform. And he's going to tell us about profitability, calculating it down to the order level. Ooh, that P word, it's important and it's scary, and it gets ignored too often by people sharing screenshots of their revenue on Twitter. But he has quite the story about how he got into e-commerce and the time he spent. So I want to pick his brain on that and calculating profitability and more. It should be an adventure into the wilds of e-commerce. I'm Kurt Elster.
Check nasty.
And this is the Unofficial Shopify podcast. Thomas, Mr. Gleeson, how are you doing?
Hey, Kurt. How are you getting on? Very good. All good from my side.
Lovely weather here today. Where are you located?
I am in the west coast of Ireland in a place called County Clare. I'm on the west coast of Ireland here. First of all, just want to say really excited to be on the pod. I think I've been listening to, my first episode I was trying to think before we came on. I think it was the CrossNet episode probably 18 months ago.
With Chris.
Yeah, with Chris. That was it, exactly. So I tuned in for quite a while. And during my time at Shopify, I suppose this podcast was always intermittently coming up in various Slacks of different teams. It's been quite the journey for you as well, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. It's always weird because, like, in my head, maybe 100 people listen to it, and I know that's not the case. Oh, this publicly traded company, and occasionally your show gets passed around in Slack channels. Every time I'm always surprised, and I suppose I shouldn't be.
Not at all. The cohort of guests you've had on over the years has been tremendous, and some of the episodes have been really, really insightful. So hopefully we can add a little bit more to that today.
Well, I want to take me back to the beginning. How did you get into the world of e-commerce? What's the first thing that brought you into it?
I had no choice. Let's start from the real beginning, I suppose. So I'm from Ennis in County Clare in the west coast of Ireland here. My mother has had an e-commerce business since 2004.
Oh,
so
okay. That's when you could start e-com businesses.
Yeah, so this is actually pre-Shopify. We started on a company. I can't even remember the name of the e-commerce platform at this stage, but my mother had to do a lot of the coding for the website herself. A lot of the payment processing had to happen through our house phone. So we were all trained in how to take an order over the phone, how to take credit card details. This was before everything got really, really secure and everything else like that. But
you're just writing the 16 digits down on like a napkin next to the fridge.
Oh,
not exactly PCI compliant, but 2004.
Nothing was. Yeah, really, really interesting. I suppose we saw the pains and the problems that went with building an e-commerce business right from the beginning. At our kitchen table, we would have all known the problems if the checkout was broken that day, because that was my mother's main job. That was supporting the business below. And if the checkout was broken, which back in those days, it was broken a hell of a lot more frequently than it is today, that was obviously a massive problem. Instead of hoovering the hall in our house or cleaning our rooms, we were often doing SEO on her website and trying to build up keywords and meta tag titles and all that kind of thing. So in terms of where e-commerce started for me, it's been a while.
Even having witnessed that, having seen the trials and tribulations, you still followed your parents into that business world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was 2004. I set up my first e-commerce business myself at 18 or 19. So it was actually a business selling personalized children's books. So I used to write the books, and my granddad is a great artist. He's a painter. So he used to actually paint all the illustrations for the book. So I wrote probably 4 to 5 personalized kids books, and that was my first venture. I had a couple of small e-commerce businesses after that again, but really, really exciting. I never made loads of money from them or anything like that, but what an education to get, to learn how to set up a website, how to source products, how to run a Facebook ad, how to set up a website, how to run an email marketing campaign, YouTube, Udemy, all great resources online, and such a really good education.
And that's a ton of valuable skills that you need as an online entrepreneur. In pretty much all of those things were things I learned through this podcast, as I went. So at what point do you end up working at Shopify? How did that end up part of your career?
Yeah, really good question. So I think it was January 2019, I actually decided to move my personalized kids book business from another e-commerce platforms to Shopify. So I ended up doing a good few online courses, worked on that for a couple of months, got it up and running. I was doing a bit of work for my mom on her website. We actually migrated that around June of 2019. And then I saw an ad pop up online for a Shopify support role. And I just thought to myself, well, I've been pretty immersed in this world for the last 6 months. What better way to learn about the platform than to go and work there? So I did a couple of interviews, and I think I did my onboarding about a month after that, around the end of July 2019. To be honest, an amazing experience. Like I went in to really try and learn the ropes of how to run the platform, probably with the end goal to build an e-commerce store myself, probably a bit more of a successful one down the line. But the more I kind of got into it, I suppose I got a real love for the analytics side of things. And I suppose I was applying that to my parents' business and really saw maybe some of the drawbacks or some of the gaps that we had in our business and how I could really help them grow their business. But the more I got into that role at Shopify, I realized I probably had a better skill for helping people grow their own businesses. And that's kind of that's the role I've kind of gone down, I suppose, over the years.
What was your role there? It was support.
Yeah, so I started off in customer support, Kurt. So originally helping people onboard. So how do I add a product? My checkout is broken. How do I change my theme? I did that for 1 year. Then I moved into Shopify Plus support. So the numbers got a bit bigger. Platform are still the same. But again, really cool to see how different businesses of a larger scale, how they faced their problems, how they spotted opportunities and areas to, I suppose, improve their product roadmap as a whole. So I did that for probably 7 or 8 months. And then from there, I went into a merchant success manager role. So essentially as an e-commerce consultant. So you're advising on e-commerce and marketing strategy along with general Shopify roadmap. So I was in that role for probably nearly 2 years. So originally started off with brands mainly in the UK between 5 and 15 million. And then the last probably year was in the region of like maybe 25 to 100 million. So between my own e-commerce businesses, Mam's e-commerce business, and then actually being front and center with all of these really, really large Shopify brands, it was an amazing experience for me to really be at the front line of a lot of these e-commerce businesses, hear about their concerns, hear about what they're worried about, but also how they're actually planning for the future, how they think about different things. And I couldn't have asked for a better experience, to be honest.
It sounds like you've got quite the e-commerce education here, like lifelong, starting with a family business and then your own experiences and then moving to Shopify and then moving through those support roles, but kind of up the tier where starting at support level, moving to plus support, you said similar vibes, but different, bigger numbers, different challenges in scaling. And then moving to that merchant success manager role, which you're right, it's a kind of support role, but it's more consultant focused. What was the common theme to issues you saw? I'm sure there were several, but like there's probably one thing that kind of stood out to you.
What were we really trying to help with? A lot of it was, I suppose, limitations merchants might have had in the platform. So we would have to try and, I suppose, consult with the internal product teams to A, help those features get built, or B, try and find a workaround with some of the internal teams to see, okay, this merchant has X problem, how can we get around that? Whether that was going to be through a feature released by Shopify directly or through using a third-party solution for the Shopify App Store. That was a lot of the work. And generally, to be honest with you, and I know this from our own business at home, that a lot of e-commerce founders, at Shopify, my world was literally on the Shopify dashboard. But you have to remember, these people are often doing customer service. They're trying to source new product for next year. They're worrying about rent and rates and everything else like that. And their Shopify world is often limited to a couple of, maybe a half an hour, 2 hours a day, whatever it is. So a lot of my role at Shopify was really helping the merchants understand what the platform was actually capable of. And you'd get that insight, I suppose, from working with so many different businesses at their varying degrees of complexity and of experience, I suppose, and understanding, okay, I saw this work really well at this brand, but I can see from looking at your Shopify setup, you haven't set this up. So maybe this is something that you could actually implement. Shopify Flow, enabling automation, I suppose, was definitely a massive part of that role. And often you come across merchants who are doing quite unnecessarily mundane operational pieces within the business. But once you could turn on Shopify Flow, often it was a massive game changer and a hell of a time saver for a lot of businesses.
It's kind of interesting. The way you describe that, the client services role we adopt as an agency in our agency work really sounded no different than what you just described. At least like a lot of what I do is, people come to you with a problem and you go, okay, well, these 3 other stores had a similar problem and solved it with this feature. have you considered that? They're like, we didn't even know that was an option. You know, you don't
Yeah,
know what you don't know. Or hey, we were told we can't do this. And the answer is like, well, all right, just do it a little differently. And now you can. It's a workaround. And
completely. And I
occasionally you
mean,
get like, hurry up and wait, where okay, there's this feature that's right around the corner that's going to solve this. You just got to hold out.
completely. And I listened to your podcast last week on Shopify editions. Like in a weird way, this is often a criticism of the platform. It's like, I can't keep up to date. Well, it's a good criticism. You wouldn't want to be on an e-commerce platform that wasn't innovating fast enough, because they're releasing so much and the product is advancing so much. This is good, but it also means that you need to try and stay as up to date as possible to really make use of the platform as a whole. Because even when I think back to Shopify in 2019, the platform has advanced leaps and bounds since then. So trying to stay up to date with all of the new product releases and features that the platform as a whole is capable of, it's challenging, but spotting those areas of opportunity, I suppose, are what helps those brands grow as well.
You know, 5 days a week, I'm spending like minimum 20 hours in that Shopify admin. And
Yeah.
even with across multiple stores with different configurations and necessities, and even with that, I still don't touch every single feature. There are features I probably haven't even heard of, let alone used. Sometimes that's frustrating in the form of FOMO, which I'm like, I bet I'm missing something. Even just after I recorded that Editions episode that went live, in first week in August, the week after, I played with a few features we talked about, and I was like, oh, I kind of misunderstood this. And then I'm like, I'll have to, when I do the next episode, I'll be like, oh, quick correction here. But even then, I spend so much time in this. I eat, breathe, sleep it. And even with that, I still get stuff wrong about approaches. Until you play with it, you don't necessarily really understand it. But all right, Shopify has an interesting culture. Do you think there was any influence from Toby, Harley, that culture on the way you approach e-com and entrepreneurship now?
Yes, they definitely have their stamp on how the company runs. Very mission driven, very merchant focused. That was probably the biggest thing I took away. You hear a lot of businesses that are merchant focused or customer focused, but when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's more revenue focused. I can't say that was the case at Shopify. Just going back to those feature release pieces specifically, a lot of this stuff that would have been even announced at Editions probably has come as a result of a feature request from merchants over and over again. We were really taught to think like an entrepreneur, I suppose, from every level. We had great education perks internally, own your own development, that kind of thing. They really wanted you to think like a business owner as much as possible, even within the constraints of what is now a very, very large corporation.
And do you have a fun memory, an inspiring story, a lesson, anecdote, something from your time at Shopify that stuck with you before we move on?
Yeah, I suppose for me, it was all about trying to really help the business owners. And if I felt I could make an impact on their business, that was what really felt to me that I was doing a good job at my business, at my role, I suppose. One key part, I suppose, I remember was a business, an apparel business in the UK that were starting to struggle. Average order value was one piece that I suppose I had noticed hadn't really moved, even though the sales numbers as a whole had increased over across the board. Their advertising costs had gone through the roof, and I suppose that contribution margin on an order level hadn't really got a whole lot better for them. So what I actually did was I spotted some really good upsell opportunities that they were missing out on that I suppose I had seen in place with some other apparel merchants I had been working on with. They did implement it, thankfully, and they did see, I think it was a 16% uplift in average order value within the first 3 months that they continued to maintain throughout the business. That was a massive win for them. It actually changed the whole unit economics of the business as a whole. And for me, that was really, really rewarding because they came to me with the problem. I could use my experience from working with other merchants to really point out some key areas of opportunity. In this case, it was average order value through an upsell mechanism. Worked really well for them. Yeah, this quote, they just changed their business as a result.
Getting that, looking at those unit economics, getting the AOV up, that boosts profitability, I have to think. That's your passion project, right? Is profitability and unit economics. Let's switch gears to the importance of profitability. Why is understanding profitability not more important, but more important now than ever before in e-commerce?
I suppose to start, one of the main issues I see with e-com at the moment is that everybody's orientated themselves to revenue metric. Everybody's looking for Shopify screenshots of the revenue. Your ROAS is a byproduct of your revenue. Your average order value is a byproduct of your revenue. Often you see LTV metrics as a byproduct of single just revenue alone. Unfortunately, that doesn't take into account any margin, any contribution margin, profitability elements, that kind of thing. So I suppose my segue into this crazy world of profitability through ecom, again, actually started at home. So my father is an accountant. So he was our accountant for Mam's business for as long as I can remember as well. Yeah, I suppose over the years, I was doing a spreadsheet for my parents on a Monday evening, trying to pull together all of the core Shopify metrics. So not just our revenue, but our average order value, our number of sessions, our new customer rate, repeat customer rate, conversion rates. Then also trying to bring in, I suppose, all of our core Google Analytics metrics, Google Ads, Facebook Ads, TikTok, Klaviyo metrics, and the operational expenses of the business. Now, Kurt, it was painfully manual, to be perfectly honest with you. But I did see the value that my parents actually got from having these numbers at their fingertips. Like a lot of businesses, I suppose, over COVID, we saw quite good growth. And that manifested itself in higher return on ad spend. Now, as you might have remembered at the start of the episode, I mentioned we were doing SEO for our parents' businesses for years. We actually didn't launch a paid ad till 2016, 17. So we were over 10 years in operation, which sounds like a dream state for anyone operating an e-com business today. So we didn't need to spend heavily on paid advertising. But again, as we did over COVID, that ROAS got a lot higher. Now, as that ROAS got higher over COVID, I was going to my dad and saying, look, we need to increase these ad budgets because this ROAS is really, really good. I'm not allowed to spend a cent in our family business without justifying it to the nth degree. So what that forced me to do was to actually understand, okay, what is our break-even point ROAS on a product level? What's our break-even ROAS on a business level? To really understand how much room do we have to push, or do we need to pull back on our marketing spend in order to achieve profitability? So as I was going to my dad with that ROAS figure, he came back and said, what is, so again, it forced me to understand what those unit economics actually looked like. And it took me a while to get there, but when I got there, I noticed an issue at home as a result of that spreadsheet. But I also saw it firsthand at Shopify with a lot of the merchants, where a lot of the e-commerce founders and operators today, they're getting their financial advice on how to run the business from their accountant or their bookkeeper. And a lot of the time, that person isn't strictly an e-commerce accountant or an e-commerce bookkeeper. So, for instance, they're just seeing the P&L at the end of every week or every month or whatever it is, but they don't understand the metrics that constitute how that P&L has come to fruition, I suppose. So they don't get conversion rates or ROAS or average order value, that kind of thing. They see total sales, OpEx, marketing spend, profitability. So essentially what a lot of these people are doing, a lot of the founders are doing, is taking advice from these these accountants or bookkeepers who don't really understand their business. And I think that was probably allowed to fly in the last couple of years when ad spend was much, much more efficient online. But as these ad costs have got more expensive, I suppose as inflation has just driven the cost of doing business up online, you really need to have a firm handle on those unit economics to really drive a profitable business today.
And when you say unit economics, we're talking about being able to track these KPIs down to the order level, right?
Correct. Yeah, so there's probably a couple of different facets within unit economics, really. So first one was the break-even point. Understanding your ROAS isn't really much good to you unless you understand what your break-even point is. You could have an agency telling you it's 2 or 3, and that might sound great, but unless you understand what your benchmark is or your break-even point is, that's going to be very different for every business. And understanding if that's a 2 or a 3 isn't really much use to you. So you need to factor in your product costs, your transaction fees, your 3PL costs, your shipping costs, and then actually understand, okay, what is that break-even point ROAS on a product level, and then actually manifest that out over the course of the business as a whole as well to understand, okay, based on my run rate of sales today, this is my ROAS, this is my break-even point, and I suppose the arbitrage in the middle there is going to be whether you made a profit today or a loss today.
And walk us through it with an example of how knowing that profit on a single order is beneficial.
Absolutely. So for instance, if you had an order and you sold it for, I don't know, $100, and you bought the product for $20, basic math would tell you that profitability on that order is 80. But you might have to strip out your tax. You might have to also strip out your shipping costs, your transaction fees, your fulfillment costs. So your profitability on that order might actually be somewhere else down around $50. That's a big issue, I suppose, with a lot of businesses I see today, where they don't actually understand what their true gross margins actually look like, because they're really just going off a revenue number and a product cost number. But e-commerce, you need to understand all those extra variable costs, because the devil is really in the detail there. And unless you have those unit economics and those variable costs really dialed in, you're not accurate. You're not reporting accurately on what your profitability actually might look like. Now, popping in at the end of every day to understand your order level profitability isn't really going to be a whole lot of use to you. You might be getting hundreds, if not thousands of orders a day, but popping in at the end of every week or every month and actually just sorting by, okay, this is the top 1% of profitable orders. And what is the genetic makeup of these orders? Like, what has caused this subset of orders to be really, really profitable? It could be orders that have really high margin. We mightn't have given any discounts away. We mightn't have given any free shipping away. So how do we replicate this as much as possible? Now, I'd say most e-commerce operators will be able to tell you what that order looks like because they're the ones they like to see all the time. But I actually think understanding the inverse of that is probably even more important from a profitability perspective. In, okay, why is this subset of orders really unprofitable or really low margin making? And that's actually where we're probably seeing a lot of people get even more value from the platform is, okay, why is this order generating a 5% margin? Is it because we've given them a welcome 10 discount? We've given them a free shipping threshold and we've actually haven't made much margin on the product even before those discounts. A lot of the time business owners are in a bit of shock when they actually see the margin that they're making on an order level. And I suppose understanding, those really profitable orders, that's important. But understanding the really unprofitable orders will also help you, I suppose, maybe think about your discounting strategy better, thinking about your markup better, thinking about your promotional strategy all through the lens of profitability, I suppose.
And so do you think for merchants who are tracking profits, that most common mistake they're making is looking at profits with rose-colored glasses and being like, oh, well, these are the really profitable orders. I'm doing good. I'm so smart. Because they're ignoring the other orders that may actually be costing them money. And then we hand wave that away with, oh, well, we've acquired those customers. They'll come back and make a second purchase. We'll make it up then. Do you think that's the most common mistake? What is it?
That's a really common mistake as well, just really focusing on the good without trying to focus on the ugly, unfortunately. They're probably twofold as well in that it's really difficult to actually ascertain if you're profitable or not on an order because there is so much scattered data. Like Shopify won't tell you what your shipping costs are or your fulfillment costs are. You can't see your product and your transaction fees, but depending on your average order value, that fulfillment cost and that shipping cost is going to be quite a material percentage of what your average order is. For instance, if you have a $50 AOV and you're giving away free shipping and you work with 3PL, that could be $8 to $9 of variable cost that you're not accounting for on an order level, which is pretty significant. You're getting towards 20% of your margin, 20% of your order value that you're not actually accounting for in terms of variable costs. So making sure that you have a data platform in place that can actually centralize all of that for you is going to be incredibly important as well.
And it sounds like we're moving into your app. You have an app, a service called StoreHero, and you described it to me as a profitability platform. Well, let's start with what it is.
Great question. So it probably has come as a result of all of my experiences at home with our family business, working in that spreadsheet, and from working with Shopify merchants over a number of years, whereby I just saw a big gap in merchants really understanding their numbers. So what we have built is a profitability platform for e-commerce D2C brands to centralize all of their e-commerce, all of their marketing channels, and also all of their financial operations to get a true sense of those margins, unit economics, and the profitability. So they can log in each day and have a full view of all of those variable costs, all of those true margins and contribution margin figures all the way throughout their business.
Was the moment when you realized that you should pursue this? When did you say, all right, I'm going to build this thing?
A lot of e-commerce businesses today, they're operating on a solid basis. But unfortunately, with the nature of any business sub 5 million is going to struggle to have the resources, maybe pay for an internal data analyst. And okay, I was doing this spreadsheet for my parents for quite some time, and I would often just send the spreadsheet on a weekly basis, but I would get the feedback from my parents that this is just a wall of numbers. I need something to actually bring this together and tell me what's going on. A lot of businesses, they're not getting to the position even where they have that set of numbers, or they don't know how to actually comprehend what any of it means. And so I suppose I started working on that maybe 4 years ago. During my time at Shopify, I was doing a college degree at night. So in my final year, we had to do a thesis. So I did thesis on actually turning the spreadsheet into a real business. And then towards the end of my thesis, I met my co-founder, Carl, who was actually starting to work on something similar. And we launched in December of 2023.
All right. So this is a relatively new thing for you. What were some of the challenges you faced this year trying to build it? 'Cause building an app is hard. I assume this is your first, and this one is not simple.
No, it's definitely not simple. What are the challenges? I suppose every e-commerce business is incredibly dynamic and unique. There is a lot of similarities. Any business from 0 to 40, 50 million on Shopify is using a relatively similar stack, but yet they're all so unique and dynamic. You really need to cater for all of those different businesses, their unique needs and wants. They're all using Shopify. They're all using GA. They're all using Google ads, Facebook ads. A lot of them are now using TikTok ads. They all have variable costs and operational expenses as well. That part wasn't too difficult, but I suppose trying to build the edge cases as to how you want to enable merchants, I suppose, to customize the platform to their needs, but also not bring in too much where you're trying to solve for everyone. Because unfortunately, if you try and solve for everyone, you end up solving for no one, because the product just gets overly complex and it's not really much use to anyone at all. So we probably made a conscious effort to maybe pull back on going really deep in certain areas for the benefit of everybody else using the platform, so that it's simple and easy to use, and that you don't really need to be a data analyst to understand the platform, that you can log in here every day and really just start making decisions off the data that's there.
Right. There are similar tools as far as reporting, analytics, business intelligence platforms, and I find them all so dense, obtuse, and intimidating that ultimately they don't particularly get used. Is there anything unique or special about your software that's going to set it apart from those?
Yeah, a really good question. I suppose we've probably conducted interviews with over probably 200 different merchants at this stage. Many of those merchants were using other platforms as well. And what you've just kind of alluded to there was probably a lot of the feedback that we got, in that, okay, the data is all great here, but how do I use it? Because it's really complex, and every business owner, every business we're working with is going to have somebody using the platform that has a completely different level of experience. We've tried to really put a keen focus, I suppose, on the simplicity, really starting with the onboarding down to how the data is actually presented, so that when you do log in, e-commerce is difficult, but if you can have your data structured in the right way, it's actually quite straightforward. There's probably two ways to make decisions. One is understanding, and the other one is by using data. Using your understanding is probably a bit more complex because there's a lot that goes into that. But if you have your data structured in a certain way, the decisions are often obvious. So we've tried to really make that front and center of the platform throughout. Our onboarding only takes probably 10 to 15 minutes. And once that's in place, you can really start making better decisions immediately based on your order level profitability, on your contribution margin, on a business level, on a new customer level. And to be honest with you, I think we've done a good job, even interviewing a lot of the customers that are already using the platform, that we've done quite a good job in just making things as simple as possible throughout the platform.
And it's a hard thing to accept the phrase fun and easy and unit economics. Those things together don't really jive for me. How do you think you achieve that? How are you making understanding these things accessible?
Probably the main metric we're really getting businesses to focus on today, it's not revenue, it's not ROAS, it's actually this thing called contribution margin. So essentially, it's your revenue minus your total cost of goods. So making sure that you have not just your product costs in, but your shipping costs, your transaction fees, and your fulfillment fees, and any other variable costs that might go along with fulfilling that order, minus all of your marketing costs. So unfortunately, we have a situation where a lot of business owners are just constantly trying to maximize their ROAS or maximize their MER or whatever it is. But getting to understand that absolute value in your contribution margin, dollars or pounds or euros or whatever it is, that's what we're really trying to educate merchants on, trying to understand to grow their business properly. So again, your contribution margin is your profit before your operating expenses. I suppose just to give a bit of an example of how I've used this at home for our business, like our family business is quite skewed towards Q4. So typically, like a lot of e-commerce businesses as well, we'd have a quieter summer than we definitely would have a winter. And often over the years, we would pull back on marketing spend over summer because the revenue figures were low. But our operational expenses were always going to be relatively static. So often we'd be loss making or just about break even over those summer months. But because we have the data at hand now, we could actually see that the underlying unit economics were actually quite strong, but we were only just generating enough contribution margin to actually generate a profit after our operating expenses. I suppose this year we've really doubled down. We've actually nearly doubled or tripled the advertising spend. The contribution margin has gone up by about 30-40%, but all that increased efficiency is actually just flowing directly to the bottom line because we have the same operation expenses in July that we would have largely in November. Might be a small variant, nothing too material. So again, we're starting to see more and more agencies, I suppose, brands get their agencies to report on contribution margin as well, as opposed to just their ROAS, because it is a really good indicator, I suppose, as to how efficient your marketing spend is as a whole. And again, not looking at your ROAS as just a revenue number, but your contribution margin as an absolute figure of your profitability.
And how do you think that contribution margin aligns with what successful marketers are looking for today as we become, more distrustful of ROAS reporting?
ROAS reporting, attribution issues, they're well documented. But the contribution margin isn't going to take into account anything that Facebook or Google say. It's literally just taking your total spend, your total revenue, minus all of your cost of goods, minus your total marketing spend. And irrespective of what Facebook or Google are going to say, this contribution margin figure, we're not listening to any of those platforms. This is actually what's left at the end of the day. And as long as we can keep increasing spend and that number keep going up, brands are supposed scaling their ad spend in the confidence that they're doing the right thing for their business.
And any chance, if you've done 200 interviews and this thing's been running less than a year, any success stories to share from a brand that's been able to use this to really understand and grow?
One brand I suppose we're working with in Ireland here at the moment, they probably had been putting too much faith in their agency to just report on their ROAS and the revenue numbers of the business. But I suppose once we've really dug into the platform, we could see from their Facebook and Google Ads account that they were definitely underspending in a lot of areas and trying to actually maybe reduce the scale of the spend to improve the ROAS. So for instance, they might want to spend 10K this month, but actually spending 15K at a slightly less ROAS was going to result in a much higher contribution margin for the business at the end of the day. And that business is actually, I think their profits are going up by 80-90% this year to date. We started working with them in January. They were one of our pilot users. We're just about to release a case study on them in the next couple of weeks, I'd say. Hopefully they'll allow us put their name to it. Yeah, it's worked really, really well, to be honest with you. But again, it's probably been a bit of a mindset shift in this idea of contribution margin sounds like a real accounting term, but essentially it's really, really important for every e-commerce business to really understand, okay, like as these ad costs go up and as your supply chain costs go up, what is the maximum profitability of this business before my operation expenses? And once you can understand that and get into that frame of mind with your marketing spend, it'll just enable you to grow your business a hell of a lot more.
That's got to be rewarding. Your experience, your theory here, on how to calculate business KPIs for a business intelligence dashboard has helped an e-commerce brand succeed and be more profitable. That's got to be rewarding.
It is. And it's at the cornerstone of everything that we're building. And that if I knew how to actually think about unit economics and contribution margin 7-8 years ago, we would have grown massively at home for our family business, but I didn't. And this area of kind of a weird intersection between marketing and accounting is probably only starting to come to the fore now for a lot of brands. And I just see that over the years, I've seen so many brands that probably haven't done as well as they could have done because maybe they hadn't got their data in the right place. Maybe they're focusing on the wrong metrics. But Facebook and Google are still going to be the most probably desirable channels or the most profitable channels for most businesses. But there's still a lot of confusion for a lot of businesses out there in not fully comprehending what those unit economics or profitability actually look like. So I suppose we're just trying to bring the tools I suppose I would have seen at higher level Shopify stores to the masses so that every e-commerce business can be in a position where they can just log in every day and actually see the numbers that matter to them and how they can scale their business by doing so profitably. A lot of SMBs in particular, scaling your ad spend is terrifying. You want to add an extra zero to my Facebook ads budget. That's terrifying for a lot of e-commerce businesses, but you can actually have your data structured in a way that you understand the true impact from a profitability perspective. I think you're just in a much better position to grow your spend confidently with a lot more clarity as well.
Well, what's your vision here? As you're early on, but where do you see StoreHero going? Where do you want to go next with this?
So at the moment, we have about 50 paying customers scattered throughout Ireland, the US, Australia. We're really trying to hit the US a lot harder in the next couple of months as well. We've actually just launched a white labeling solution for agencies as well, so they can actually white label the StoreHero platform and just start reporting on that contribution margin figure for a lot of their brands as well. We see AI as a massive play down the line. We don't want to get distracted by it right away. We've a hell of a lot of work to still do. We think about AI. I think the best businesses are going to be built with the fact that they have a proprietary data set built within it. And I think we're confident in that, and that we're pulling the most important data from all the key sources that e-commerce operators today are operating with. And I do think down the line there could be a massive play for us in the AI space.
You know, my experience with ChatGPT suggests it's really bad at math. Like phenomenal at copy editing. Math, you can really throw this thing for a loop with just like some basic arithmetic. I don't know that I'm not ready to have ChatGPT do my bookkeeping yet.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But that's probably why we don't want to get distracted by it right away. We do see a big play for it down the line, but like anything, it'll get a hell of a lot better down the line. So we're probably just trying to wait around for that a little bit.
For sure. And all right, if you could give one piece of advice to our listeners, you know, what's the thing that they need to know to thrive in e-com with a Shopify store?
It's not rocket science. Genuinely, you need to start getting away from revenue numbers and focusing more on your profit numbers. This has never been more important, I suppose, in today's landscape where your ad costs are through the roof and generally the cost of business is going up. I think over the years, a lot of businesses have probably got away with having those marketing and finance functions operating in silos. That was probably masqueraded by cheap CAC and ROAS on Facebook over the years, whereby your marketer didn't need to speak finance and your finance team did definitely not want to speak marketing. So trying to get those two functions in unison, I think, is how the best brands are going to go today.
It is fabulous advice. And for your service, how do we find StoreHero?
Yeah, perfect. So you can catch us over at storehero.ai, or you can catch us on LinkedIn as well.
In my notes here, I see you have a special offer for our listeners. Tell me about it.
So for today's episode, anyone that comes on and will mention the Unofficial Shopify podcast, we're actually offering 20% off and monthly consultation calls for the first 3 months to really delve in and help you understand all of the key metrics that matter to your business.
A fabulous deal. StoreHero.ai. Check it out. Oh, there's AI in the TLD. Oh my gosh. Thomas Gleeson, StoreHero, thank you so much. And to our listeners, if you enjoy the episode, subscribe, swipe up on the show art, check out the show links, leave a review if you listen on iTunes and it supports that and you're feeling charitable, or join our Facebook group, Unofficial Shopify Podcast Insiders, and we would be happy to have you. Until then, keep selling, my friends.
Check nasty.